Oh,
All right, cool. Okay, hi guys. So we're gonna start the Creative Cowboy Conversations. I'm doing this because it's a grade for school, so I decided to do it on last semester. I did it on like a Native American cowboy who was Shane Hendren, and this semester I decided to choose Gary Morton, and we became I'm pretty sure we're friends now, but we're going to be talking about art, cowboying, ranching, and the Western industry and how the Western industry is influencing the creative industry and how they're tying themselves together. And so Gary Morton is here with us today, and he's from Sapio, New Mexico. I recently visited him at his place, and it was so gorgeous, a lot of elk. And he co-founded the Working Ranching Cowboys Association, and he'll introduce himself. He does a very good explanation on what he does. So Gary, would you mind introducing yourself?
sure, Kayla. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Mhm.
Myself. Well, I started working on ranches when I was just a kid, 18 years old, barely out of high school. And luckily, I went to work on the Bell Ranch, which is one of the bigger ranches in New Mexico. I worked there about 10 years, and I didn't know anything when I started. Worked there about 10 years, and after about 8 years, I was the number two man there. I was the wagon boss. Uh, I always did enjoy doing art, even when I was a kid. Uh, I got upset and left that job one day at the Bell Ranch and started looking for another. And in the meantime, to make a living, I did my artwork. And I didn't find another job I liked, so finally dawned on me, you know what? You live 6 months off art. So I just continued it. It was, I think, good for me because I kind of had the best of both worlds. I could come home and paint the life, and the way I work, I would take my camera and go to work on different ranches and take a lot of pictures. Usually, when the spring branding came around or the fall weaning came around, a lot of those ranches still pull out wagons, and I'd go day work and carry my camera, and then go home in the winter when the weather's bad and paint pictures. So I did that for 25 years, and I literally got burned out, and so I went back to cowboying. It was funny because I leased some big places and had cattle on those places, cared for the cattle on those leases. Um, 30 years after I left the Bell Ranch, I found myself back there again, and worked there a couple of years, and it was really good for me. But cowboying's kind of a young man's game. And I knew I would eventually go back to my art. So after a couple of years of that, I moved here to Sapio. I take care of a little ranch and part-time deal, and I paint my pictures.
Yeah, you've told me a story about when you sat on the board with the New Mexico Art Creative Board or something like that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was quite a good experience. I liked it. It exposed me to a lot of different kinds of art. Um, I was the chairman of the New Mexico Arts Commission,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's one of those volunteer governor-appointed boards. And I actually did that for 3 different governors. And of course, what they do basically, they support the arts. They do it with National Endowment for the Arts money. At the time, we were giving out grants to the tune of about $1 million total. And it was everything from the symphony to folk arts, music, all kinds of art that was created in New Mexico. And so it was, the best thing about it is I got to meet a lot of artists in all genre. from all over the state of New Mexico. After I was chairman of that for about 8 years, I went to work for the state of New Mexico, running the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is a pretty big agency in government, and it deals with all the state museums, the state library, historic preservation, the arts, and once again, that was a very interesting job. I've had 2 jobs in my life, art or cowboys, and now all of a sudden I'm having to put on a coat and tie and go sit behind a desk in Santa Fe. It was quite an experience, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. You were telling me that you helped with the appropriations of Native American, like regalia and so forth of that. And since I'm Navajo and like a couple of us are Navajo, we appreciate that, and we understand how important that is, and seeing that you played a part in that, that's pretty interesting and pretty cool. And I'm just thankful that you were there to do that. And do you have any like stories from that?
Oh, in fact, I was in that chair, and the Museum of New Mexico basically holds huge collections of things of all kinds related to New Mexico. And much of that, I think there are 9 museums under the umbrella of the Museum of New Mexico. And the museum that dealt with a lot of that was the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, and the History Museum. And so I was sitting in that chair overseeing all that when they passed a law called NAGPRA, Native American Graves Repatriation. And, it's a great law. It's a great thing to do, but we found it very difficult. Some of the tribes would accept it and were glad to get those artifacts back. Others didn't want it. I had to learn it was a cultural thing. It was different among everybody. Mm-hmm. And it was quite a big project. I'm sure it's ongoing as we speak.
Yeah, I bet it is. So when you talk about like the Western industry and the creative industry, how do you wish they would tie together? Are you making anything to make the ties between them?
Well, I think it happened already naturally. Mm-hmm. Most cowboys are pretty creative, and I think it's born of necessity. Most cowboys can make some kind of artwork. They learn to make their own bits, or they learn to make their own saddles or boots, and that was born of necessity of living rural and being poor all the time and all that. So they just learned how to make their own stuff. And I have several friends that are real cowboys and real artists that whether they make really neat gear, really high quality gear, or paint or sculpt, it's pretty amazing what they're capable of, and they've been doing it forever. They had to. So I think that bridge is made. The trick is going to be to figure out how to make a living at it.
Yeah. So you say you're partial to both sides, like cowboying and art. You can't do either one without the other. I feel the same way too.
Yeah, it's got to be, to me, and I know not everybody will agree with this, but to me, it needs to be authentic. If I can paint a picture, I know I can. I can do a horse, I know I can. If somebody told me it'd give me $1 million to paint a boat, I couldn't do it. That's not where my heart is. Mm-hmm. And I think art of all kinds should come from the heart.
Yeah, definitely. I know passion plays a lot into just being a cowboy and being an artist. You have to be passionate about what you want to do, and wholeheartedly you have to go about it. And one thing I really appreciate about your artwork is that you pay attention to the details and to the cowboy who is on the horse and your surroundings. You want it to be as authentic as possible. And that's what I want to portray. That's why I chose photography, because it's easy. You just click and it's already there. But you have to have the patience and the talent to actually paint it all. And I just admire that, especially like when you were telling me about your paintings and the process that you go through.
Well, yeah, I mean, and here's my explanation, or the way I feel about detail and authenticity. Every cowboy has to be pretty authentic. I mean, you can't do it riding around in a pickup. You can't. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, can't. You got to be authentic. You got to get out there and do it, and you got to ride a horse to do it. There's a lot of places that not even these four-wheelers go. And they're generally, authentic, honest, hardworking people. Then they have a style of all their own. I mean, each cowboy's gear, his saddle, his bits, everything, his hat, the way he shapes it, his chaps, and the way he likes those, all those things are important to him. You spend a month or two wages on a saddle, you're pretty proud of it. And then details become important to you as you go about your job. You might be riding down a fence and you see some hair on that fence. You wonder, and then you take note of it and you find out you're short a cow or something. You go back to that spot. So you just have to pay attention to all the details. And so it translates into my artwork in that I want it real. I want it good. And I want the cowboys, and I try to paint real cowboys. They should be able to recognize themselves, and their friends recognize them. And when you've ridden with a guy for a long time, you can see him coming 2 miles off in the pasture and know who it is just by the way he's riding. So all those things are important to me, and I just want it to be real. And, I've been doing it for over 40 years, did not know or even think about that I was doing history. But looking at 40 years worth of paintings, a lot of those guys have passed on. A lot of the ranches have changed operations where they no longer pull a wagon. They don't use as many horses. There's so much of it that, in fact, did become history just over the passage of time.
I know I'm a history nut. I want to know everything about history and all of it. I love hearing old stories, and especially your stories. And one story you were telling me about is when you leased the White Mountain Apache or the Mescalero Apache. You leased land
Yes.
with them and you put cattle on them. Can you tell us about that? That always makes my heart happy.
Yeah, I leased part of the Mescalero Apache Reservation in 2009, and I had about 5,000 head of cattle down there. Had myself and 4 other people that actually went down there and lived. I lived in a tent for 8 months. We actually had 3 camps. One of them had a little house that belonged to the res, and the other guy brought a camper trailer out and lived in it. But we ended up, of course, they were Mexican yearlings, is what they were. And they traveled a lot. And, somebody leaves a gate open or fences down, and we had cattle all over the place. So really got a chance to see the reservation. And the highest point on the res is Sierra Blanca, and it's 12,000 feet. And then the lowest is right below it. And so it goes up from alpine region all the way down to desert. And in fact, it's just right straight up and down. And so it was a 3 thrill to be there, living in a tent. You know, after you've done that a couple of months, you figure it out. It's just home. I enjoyed the people there very much. I enjoyed learning about their ways, beliefs, all those things. We had a pretty big time. Worked hard. Not a lot of water on the Mescalero Reservation. And there are not a lot of little small traps and pastures like where we could keep our horses at night. So we had places where we could camp, sort of limited. And, you know, we'd saddle up every day. And we'd sometimes, well, every day had to ride at least 5 or 6 miles to get in the pasture where the cattle were. And a short day was 25 miles on horseback. And most of them were probably more like 50. And it is rough country, up and down, rocks and all those things. We did it pretty good, I think. It was fun.
Yeah. What was your favorite thing about the Bell Ranch?
Well, of course, I think I came of age there. I became a man there.
Mm.
I worked there when I was 18 and didn't know anything. The first couple of years was sure hard on me. And the cowboys initiated me as cowboys would. They did not make it easy on me. I had to prove myself. But once they figured out that I wanted to do it and was interested in it and all that, and they were really helpful too. So I guess it's a big ranch. It's 292,000 acres. It's an old Mexican land grant, and it's just a great place, a great ranch. Like all places, it can be wet or dry or drought or worse. And had about 110 or 15 head of saddle horses in the remuda. We pulled the wagon out. Horses went with us. That was our home for about a month in the spring and about 6 weeks in the fall. I enjoyed the wagon very much. Somebody'd always bring a guitar, sing and play around the campfire at night. You know, and that's the core of the cow work. Everybody gets in a good mood. It's serious work, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to share a picture of the remuda that you sent me.
Yes. Cool.
Can you explain it or just talk about it?
Well, that's the remuda, and basically it was during the spring wagon, which at that time was June. They now pull it out earlier than that, but June is always hot and dry, and that's one reason they brand in. Number one, the calves are big enough to put a good brand on, and you know they get over the stress pretty quickly. But it's June, it's hot, it's dry. The dust tells you that. The grass is trying to green up, and that mesa in the background, they call that Montoya Point. And the legend was, and I think it's pure legend, I don't know, but it's a neat story. The reason it's called Montoya Point, that the Bell Ranch was the Pablo Montoya land grant. And they say Pablo stood on top of that mesa and looked to the south, stretched out his arms, and said, "I claim everything I can see." And applied for the grant, and it was given to him by the Mexican government. This was after Spain left and the Mexican government was formed. So those horses, you know, they were just ranch horses. They're not as good a horses. They weren't as good a horses as they are today, not well bred. There wasn't a single registered horse on the place. But they were ranch horses. They were tough. And some of them were hard to ride. But every one of them could get the job done if you were cowboying.
Is that where your horse Cinco comes from?
Yes,
Um,
yes. It's the Bell, and there's a mesa on the ranch called Bell Mountain, and it's kind of shaped like a bell, and that's where the brand came from. And the horses carried a Bell brand on their left shoulder. This painting, the corrals you see in the background are called beef pens, and we were moving the wagon that day. You know that you don't move the wagon every day. You camp in strategic places where you might work 2 or 3 big pastures from that one location. And so we were moving the wagon to a different location that day. And the horses, especially the older ones, they know the routine. You did it the same way, spring and fall every year. When you open the gate at the beef pens, they know where they're headed and they line out and they're ready to go someplace different.
So the Bell Ranch is out by Tucumcari, New Mexico, right?
Yes, it's west of and a little bit north of Tucumcari, about 35 miles.
Yeah. You said you grew up in Gallup as well, right?
Yes, I actually graduated from high school in Gallup. I didn't spend a lot of time there. I spent my senior year there, and my mom had a twin sister that lived in Gallup, and I lived with my aunt and uncle. And that's actually how I got into cowboy, and they were into rodeo. And they rodeoed a lot. They had kids that rodeoed, and I started going to rodeos with them and fell in love with the whole cowboy thing. And even rodeoed with them a little bit. I got on my first bucking horse at Rama,
Oh,
right near the Zuni Res.
yeah, that's going toward I-40.
It's Rama South I-40.
Oh, okay. My cousin's sister's married out there. Well, she's about to be married out there, but
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's neat country.
Yeah, it is. So talk about how you started the Working Ranching Cowboy Association.
Well, I'm just one of about 6 guys that actually did it. A friend of mine named Waddy Mitchell, he's a pretty well-known cowboy poet, was on some kind of trail ride at Amarillo, Texas, and they got to talking about this thing they wanted to do. And so at the city of Amarillo, a couple of guys from Amarillo and Waddy approached the city of Amarillo to do this. And they put Waddy in charge of finding the people that could make it happen. And Waddy is pretty well traveled in the West at that time. Knew people in every state. I was one of the guys he called from New Mexico. The American Quarter Horse Association and the Amarillo Chamber of Commerce actually financed this meeting, and they flew people in, they paid our mileage, and put us up in a hotel, provided meeting space, fed us and everything else for about 3 days while we had a meeting. And there was literally, 2 people from every state in the West. So there was 25 or 30 people there at the meeting. We spent a couple of days talking about doing something. And part of it was the ranch rodeo and all that. And we were pretty ambitious. Had a vote to form the association. And also part of that vote was to put on a world championship ranch rodeo in a year. We decided to do it. Well, time went on and people had conflicts and other issues, and it ended up, by the time we got to the first, well, even 6 months before that rodeo, 6 months after we started, there were only 6 of us left. And we were determined to go ahead and do it. We had a few good sponsors that really helped us out. The city of Amarillo continues to be a sponsor. And we pulled the first one off. Much to our surprise, it was profitable. Now, profit is important to us because our profits go back to ranch families in the form of crisis help and scholarship money for ranch kids. We just celebrated last year our 25th year. And in 25 years, we've given well over $6 million in crisis and scholarships. We just had a meeting a few months ago for our next list, slate of scholarship recipients. We currently have 46 ranch kids on scholarships, and they're 4-year scholarships, as long as they keep their grades up. And I'm pretty proud of that. A person ought to give back to his culture.
And I know you guys are starting the youth ranch rodeo, the world championship. I saw that and I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my gosh, I better get my brother's kids ready for that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. Yeah, we're going to have that this year for the first time. It's coming November. There seems to be quite a lot of interest in it. The kids will qualify the same way the big guys do. Mm-hmm. There will be sanctioned rodeos around, and the winning team. And this, for the first year or two here, I think we're going to take the top 2 or 3 teams, and they will compete in Amarillo for the youth world championship.
That's so neat. And I love that you call the cowboy culture your culture, and we as Native Americans have our own culture. And I'm just excited. I was so humbled to hear that culture has different definitions. When I was growing up, I just thought of culture as Native American culture was the only way culture could be survived. But now that I'm getting older, there's a whole lot of different cultures that claim that title. And I'm like, they deserve it. And everything needs to be not claimed, but to be proud of and to be passionate about something. And that's what I really admire about you, is your passion for the cowboy way of life in advocating for it. And when I think of agriculture advocacy, I look at you and you're doing a dang good job at it, as well as art, and being true to that. So
I think you're a pretty good spokesman yourself. Have you ever thought about this? Cowboy culture, it has nothing to do with race or anything else. It spans. It's a vocation, a livelihood, and a state of mind, and it doesn't matter the race or anything else. That's cool.
Yeah, I know. I was watching a show. It's called The Ultimate Cowboy, and they had some African American cowboys and Hispanic cowboys, and I was like, that was so exciting. I know that they exist, and especially like Fred Whitfield and like all those like Corey Solomon, the cap ropers, and seeing that they're ranch working cowboys, it was amazing seeing that they can hold their own with a culture that is not race driven. It's very diverse, and I really appreciate that. And it's a welcoming culture, and that's why I love it so much. And I'm just grateful that my dad put us in that realm, and I got to meet a lot of people, and especially with you, you've helped me network and communicate with other people, other organizations that I'm passionate about, and I'm just